We begin this afternoon continuing to follow the high-stakes crisis between the United States and Iran. Now, national security advisors are on Capitol Hill briefing lawmakers on the latest developments. This is including details of the 2 missile attacks on 2 Iraqi bases home to U.S. and coalition forces. This morning, President Donald Trump spoke directly with the nation, saying there were no casualties. However, when dealing with Iran, President Trump wants more support from NATO.
The civilized world must send a clear and unified message to the Iranian regime. Your campaign of terror, murder, mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. It will not be allowed to go forward. Today, I am going to ask NATO to become much more involved in the Middle East process.
In addition, even more sanctions are expected against Iran. In response, Iranian leadership is calling on all U.S. forces to leave the region. Meanwhile, there are no survivors after a Ukrainian airliner crashed after taking off from the Iranian capital of Tehran. Now, the crash happened early Wednesday night, killing everyone on board, including the lives of over 80 Iranians and over 60 Canadians. We're going to have team coverage this afternoon. RT's Alex Mihailovich is in Toronto with more on that part of the story. But first, for the details, we bring in RT correspondent Sara Montes to break it all down. Sara, this was a very, very sad part of last night that happened. Very late, there was lots of things going on. What do we know now about what happened?
Well, what we do know, Scotty, is that the crash killed all of the passengers on board. The plane was bound to Ukraine and carrying 176 passengers. You can see the bright light that looked like fire across the sky. Smoke and debris were all that was left on a field. This was a Boeing 737NG, not the Boeing 737 MAX that's been grounded. Officials said the plane had only reached about 8,000 feet when it abruptly lost contact with ground control. Ukraine's foreign minister, Vadim Prystaiko, confirmed there were 82 Iranians, 63 Canadians, Swedish, 4 Afghan, Germans, and also some British nationals on board. But Ukraine's Prime Minister, Alexei Hanarchuk, said Ukrainian envoys are working at the site of the crash.
We're negotiating with the Iranian side to delay our specialists who will join the investigation team. There are Ukrainian diplomats working on the crash site. Our diplomats within an hour arrived on the spot for an objective report.
Iranian authorities said that the crash was caused by technical problems after takeoff, but they didn't cite any further evidence. The crash came only hours after Iran hit the 2 U.S. military bases in Iraq in retaliation for the U.S. killing of General Qasem Soleimani. In response, the Federal Aviation Administration restricted flights over Iraq, Iran, and Persian airspace. Under international law, the investigation of the crash falls on Iranians. This is their state television reported both of the plane's black box voice and data recorders were found, but these boxes are often sent to the plane's maker for analysis. In this case, it would be sent to American company Boeing. But head of Iran's Civil Aviation Organization, he said that they will not give the black box to the manufacturer Boeing or to America, adding that the boxes will be analyzed in the country where the accident took place. Ukraine's embassy in Iran originally issued a statement ruling out any terrorism following the crash, but later they retracted that statement and they said information on the causes of the plane crash is clarified by the commission. Any statements regarding the causes of the accident prior to the decision of the commission are not official. At a news conference hours after the crash, Ukraine International Airlines executives said that the plane had been in good working conditions.
Knowing that Tehran is not an easy airport, all the preparations and training of the whole crew of plane 737 during past several years was conducted at Tehran Airport, as strange as it can sound. Therefore, during the testing, we are checking the skills of the pilot to estimate their skills during emergency situations. According to the data, the plane was at 8,000 feet of altitude and the crew error is minimal. We do not consider it, taking into consideration their experience, that it is very difficult to say that there might be something with the crew.
Scotty, this remains an open investigation, and though Iran says it was a mechanical issue, Ukraine is assisting in this query. But it's also important to mention that this model, the Boeing 737NG, or Boeing 737-800, also called, has had safety issues in the past where groundings were caused by cracks between the wing and the fuselage. So really only time will tell how long the investigation will go, in what direction, and what the occurrence was of this tragic accident.
Well, obviously an unfortunate event at obviously unfortunate times that gives us more questions. Thank you, Sarah. And as Sarah reported, over 60 Canadian lives were lost on that flight, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is responding. So for that part of the story, we turn to Arctic correspondent Alex Mihailovich in Toronto. Alex, first of all, I give my condolences to the families, those Canadian families that are having to deal with some horrible news over the last 24 hours they were not expecting. Now, I have to wonder, what is going on right now? According to the Ukraine foreign minister, the nationalities of those dead included, you know, a wide variety of folks. What is being told to those in Canada right now?
Well, we're looking at 167 passengers, 9 crew members on this flight, and out of that number, 63 were Canadians. Now, here's a statement from the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Trudeau has said that his government will reach out to international partners to ensure that the crash of a Ukraine airliner in Iran that killed 176 people, including 63 Canadians, is thoroughly investigated. Now, as you can imagine, this situation has many people talking. It's an issue when you have missiles being tossed at Iraq. You're right next door, and there's this tension between the U.S. and Iraq. So all kinds of theories on what went down here. As you just heard, the first voices to be heard were the Iranian authorities saying that it was some sort of technical issue, but that has now spread out to some other theories, and we're hearing from other experts. But as it stands right now, Canada wants to join into this investigation and wants to support any investigation as things move forward.
And Alex, as you point out, the news first came from the Iranians. In fact, it was Iranian state television that first reported this crash had happened. But they're at home in Canada. How are Canadians reacting to the news?
Well, look, these Canadians, these 63 people are basically from coast to coast in Canada. You know, their families are obviously distraught. The communities are in mourning at this point. And we're talking about people like a family of 3 that from here, from Ontario, from where we are right now. In Alberta, we have university lecturers that passed away in this crash. The hardest hit province was actually Alberta. They're saying around 30 of the individuals on this plane were from Edmonton, Alberta itself. Now, as you may know, Alberta has a very large and long-standing Ukrainian population. So, you know, this attributes to this fact. These people were flying to Kiev from Tehran. So obviously there were Ukrainians on board, or people with Ukrainian heritage. Yeah, also, we need to mention that there were Iranian Canadians on board this flight that also were hit and passed away. You know, it's a tragedy. It's a massive tragedy for this country. It's a massive tragedy internationally. So many people dying. One thing, though, is that we can expect vigils to happen here in Canada. You can look as far away as Kiev right now. People are laying flowers in front of the Iranian embassy there. So there are people that are touched by this globally. This is, once again, I can't say it enough, is a massive tragedy. And of course, our hearts go out to these people here in Canada as well as around the world.
Well, and I have to say, Justin Trudeau had remained relatively out of the situation that had been going on between Iran and the United States. Obviously, he's now been thrust into in the middle of it. Are you confident that he is going to pursue a full investigation, in his words?
Well, right now, I mean, it's going to be left up to Iran and, of course, the Ukrainian authorities to do this. How much can Canada actually contribute to this? We will see. As it stands, the situation that's going on there between the U.S. and Iran, we're seeing a lot of countries sort of hesitating to jump in, even NATO partners. You know, we've heard words from as far away as France and the U.K., a lot of debates going on. Do they stand behind the U.S.? Do they not? This is just one of those situations that, you know, it's unveiling itself right now. And while things seem to be de-escalating, which I hope everybody wants, we have this thing happening on the side, which is this plane that went down, and there's questions to why. So obviously, when you have 63 of your citizens involved in a crash like this, you want to know what happened.
Well, and you're right. And whatever is going on between Iran and the United States, this is a separate issue that does deserve the full attention just on its own because so many lives were lost. Thank you, Alex, for covering it.
Thank you.
Now I want to go into more details on this crash and the information that we have received and what, more importantly, we're still missing. We bring in Jamie Finch, former official with the National Transportation Safety Board. Jamie, this was obviously a tragedy that nobody was expecting or hoping. Right. I have to wonder, the FAA yesterday had said no flights, American flights would be going in and out of that airspace, probably because they had been possibly warned something was going to happen. Why was this plane allowed to take off out of an airport in an airspace that obviously was potentially a danger?
Well, it wasn't an American aircraft. FAA was not allowing U.S. Aircraft to fly in and out over the Iraq and Iran airspace. And it was because they had been warned that there was something that was about to happen and so forth. So they were still proceeding with they had their right to go ahead and take off and depart from Tehran. But first of all, let me really emphasize, we offer our condolences and heartfelt condolences to the family members and loved ones of those lost.
And that is the priority right now, is getting the right answers for them. And if
Sure.
it's a mechanical failure, if it was something that happened on the plane or something from the outside, these families deserve to know
Right.
what had happened. Lots of footage is coming out. There was footage, people didn't know if it was verified. Now we know some of the things that we saw immediately was verified. Various footage of the plane, both as well in the air. From what you can see, what do you give some realistic options as what could have happened with this plane?
Well, from the footage that we've seen so far that's been out there on the internet and it's not verified yet and so forth, that this was the actual plane. But what you see there, it looks like it could be two types of categories. It could either be a terrorist act or it could be a mechanical failure. From what you see in the videos, you see an aircraft that is on fire for quite some time before it crashes into the ground. So this could be a missile strike, it could be an incendiary device or a bomb on board. It could also be something that was in cargo that jostled and caught on fire. It also could be a mechanical failure of an engine or a wiring issue. So it's just way too early to speculate on what the cause of this accident was. And you're right, we do owe it to the family members to not be jerking them around and giving them false leads of information of what they think may be the cause for their loss.
And I understand there's geopolitical issues happening because of what else is going on.
Sure.
However, and I understand why these countries don't trust the information that's coming out, but Iran's not really cooperating too much and releasing the records and allowing open access
Right.
because of the various countries that were represented. Is there a governing authority, a governing board that says, guess what, that every country should have the right to come in and thoroughly do their own investigation of the incident, as well as the black boxes not being released back to Boeing because obvious mistrust of an American company right now?
Well, actually there is. It's ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the aviation branch of the UN. And so we are all part of that treaty, including Iran and the United States. And Canada and all these other countries that are party to this investigation that have a vested interest in this investigation are part of ICAO. The ICAO rules do state that the parties, all the nations have a right to be at the table as part of the investigation. Now, it's very complicated with the U.S. and Iran because we don't have diplomatic relations with that country. Our representative in Tehran is through the Swiss embassy, and so it's a very tenuous situation. Plus, add on top of that, the conflict that we're in right now with Iran, and so it's going to be very, very complicated and so forth. I do predict that the black boxes will probably be going somewhere to Europe, or possibly to Russia or one of the other members of ICAO to read out the black boxes. I think that we're also looking at a lot of posturing, political posturing by the two countries right now, especially by Iran, and they're not going to do anything that's going to look like they're working or cooperating with the U.S., but they will be working with us probably through a third party or emissary.
We will have you back on to discuss it, but I am wondering right now how Boeing's feeling right now. They've already had a very tough year. This obviously doesn't help. If they're going to actually, what kind of accountability they might have for this, if it does turn out to be a mechanical failure, as we're seeing lawsuits happen. But we're going to continue that another day once Boeing starts actually releasing some statements in regard to the crash. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie.
It's hard to clear through the debris and get right down to the nitty-gritty that is real news.
New details are coming to light in the case of Jeffrey Epstein as more
spread between the 2-year Treasury yield and the 10-year Treasury yield.
Several hundred students are staging a sit-in.
the Amazon rainforest, and the blame game is underway. It's time for RT America. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button.